Our sponsors for The Agronomists are Real Ag Radio, the Truth About Ag podcast, and Real Ag Shops. Real Ag Shops is a video series brought to you by Princess Auto. In this series, check out the smart and slick shops from across Canada. Do you know someone who has a great shop? Nominate them for a tour by emailing shaney@realagriculture.com and check out the series on YouTube. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to The Agronomists. It is our final episode of 2024, our 43rd for the year. John, thanks for reminding us, and episode 179 of the show overall since it started. So pretty cool. I'm super excited for tonight's conversation. I'm not 100% sure we will be able to get through it without me cringing. But that's okay. That's what it's all about. Thank you all, of course, for everyone joining us already in the chat. Let us know where you are, what it looks like where you are. I see Warren, who is not far from me. Yes, we are definitely here in the Ottawa Valley getting a white Christmas. It is very wet out there and blowing, and I, for one, this is the time to have it. And then on January 2nd, you can leave, and it's all good. Okay, so tonight's episode is a good one. We are going to look back at the growing season that was, but also, or perhaps more interestingly, because it's all about me, guys, it's what we covered on this show this year and some of our favorite episodes. And so to have that conversation, without further ado, I bring in, drumroll please, Peter Pete Johnson and Ray Dowbenko, both my happy little elves here tonight. Thank you for wearing the hats, gentlemen. They're quite lovely. I really do like them. Yes. Okay. Ray, joining us from Calgary-ish. Yes.
Lindsay, two things to say.
Oh,
First
two
off is a
things.
good evening to everybody on Monday night.
Mm-hmm.
And the next is to Jason, John, Warren, and Kevin for joining. When you mentioned cringe, my first thought was cringe Kringle instead of Kris Kringle. So Merry Christmas to my buddies that are on the show.
Absolutely. We should change your name, Ray, to Cringe Crinkle. There we go. Yes. I will say, Ray, it is lovely to have you on in person. Because of course, one of the reasons when we were talking about the show, I said we have to have Ray because Ray, I don't know if you missed a live show this year, and I appreciate that about you. That's what I
I
appreciate so
do try to tune in every night, every
much.
Monday. It's a
Mhm.
learning opportunity and a lot of things that I don't know about. And I just admire the people that grow and farm that have to incorporate everything that the supposed experts have to say and figure it all out and distill it down to running their operation. So much brighter people than me join this show.
Mm. But I'm going to say, um, you have more than once answered questions in the comments that we didn't have the answers to, and I appreciate that too.
You
So
know,
yes.
it's easy to sleuth about in the comments without being the face on the screen. So tonight I'm going to
Mm,
get my comeuppance, I'm sure.
yes, absolutely. All right. And also some guy named Pete has joined us. Peter Johnson. We're getting our fill. He was on the radio show today as well. Host of We Pete's Word, occasional guest when he's not on the stage. But Peter, how are you?
I am awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. Like Ray, welcome to the Real Ag Agronomist community that has joined tonight. Is just awesome. I came back in December finally after my thespian hiatus, if you will. And yep, everybody's still here and still took me back into the fold. And Lindsay, I am back on theater again late March, early April, but
Ready to go.
no Monday night
Oh,
practices. I made sure, so
thank
I
you.
will be on the agronomists as much as humanly possible.
Okay, thank you for getting your priorities straight and making everyone's local theater company avoid Monday nights. We have things to do, okay, here on The Agronomists. So there you go. Yes. Ray, it's true. The mustache is epic, and it is getting a lot of love in the comments, and I love that. Warren
Don't
has
tell my
also
wife that.
Yeah, don't encourage them. I
don't
can
encourage.
hear. Don't encourage them.
I think encouragement is well warranted. Speaking of Pete, and we did talk a little bit about this on Real Ag Radio today, but I want to touch on this because Farmer Schneck, Warren Schneckenberger, is calling you Mulbor Pete. Lately, anyway. And producer Jay, I think it might be Pete's last slide that he sent. Could we bring that up?
Yeah,
Because
no,
we
it
may
is
as well.
slide four. Slide four.
Slide 4. Sorry, slide
Slide
4. You
four.
were out of order. Okay, there you go. So this is a great photo in Brant, Oxford County of Pete's apparent favorite type of tillage. So what's going on here, Pete? Why does everybody suddenly think you love the plow? What's going on?
Because people's listening skills are horrible.
Mm,
People the
see.
people perceive what they want to perceive out of what I say. I have learned this. I've
Mhm,
actually, Lindsay, had people say to me, "You said X," and I'm going, "I don't think I said
mhm,
X." And I go back and listen to what I actually said, and I did not say that. In any case, it's been a bunch of fun. By the way, Warren, I love this picture that you sent because I did say, "Well done." Moldboard plowing. So proper moldboard plowing. The plowing in question, in the foreground at least, is some of the worst plow job I have seen in my life. It's going to take 27 frickin' passes with the dang cultivator to get that field to level out. And if you want to just ruin aggregate stability and have tillage erosion. It just, yeah. If that's the
mhm,
best we can do with the plow, I might have to go back to the disc gripper. But at the end of the day, it's called the least tillage possible all the time. It just, yeah. Yeah,
mhm,
it's rough.
mhm.
Exactly. Warren says it's
Yeah.
rough, and it's incredibly rough. Yep.
Mhm.
It looks more like
Yeah.
the road plow kind of went off the road and into the ditch, but
Yeah.
okay.
Just
No,
somebody was
no, that is a different
not
look, Ray.
using.
We see that
Yeah.
quite a bit. That is a totally different look.
Yeah. Hidden.
Got to
I
keep it on the
believe.
hard pack. That's
That's
okay.
right. Yeah, in Saskatchewan, that'd be called hitting the rhubarb. So yes, absolutely. And so, okay, and we should clarify, Pete, that on the word you did make mention of comparing, or if you had to choose between the mobile plow and the disc ripper, that you might take the plow. But again, prefacing all of it with, we're trying to do the least amount of tillage and still have a positive outcome. So there you go. I'll say though, I gotta say the whole mobile plow thing, like I get in the instances that some people are like, that's the right tool for the job. But have we not figured out better tools for the job, Pete? Like, is there nothing else that's better?
So I think there's lots of options. And the problem is that the easy answer is always the plow. The plow works. That's why we keep comparing everything to the plow. We don't compare everything to no-till. We don't compare everything to strip-till. We compare everything to the moldboard plow. And I have to be careful because there's lots of Western people on here. And the moldboard plow in Western Canada, I think they did probably use it when they first broke the sod out there. But if you
Hmm.
use it today, she's going to be an absolute disaster. But
Yeah.
are there better tools? I think the answer is absolutely. Is there a place for the moldboard plow on some farms, on an organic farm that has alfalfa that they need to break up? I think the answer is yes. But there's just, it works because we smear it, we turn it up, we get the wet dry cycles, and those wet dry cycles fix what we've destroyed, and we bury the residue. And therein lies the crux of the issue. Horst Bonner long ago said residue is the enemy. And it's really funny because residue is the holy grail because we want to build organic matter. Now, organic matter is more roots than residue, but regardless, the residue counts. And yet, it also does all these bad things in terms of soil temperature and making a blanket to keep the soil wet. And so you just kind of go, okay, is there better tools? The answer is absolutely. But there's not one better tool. There's
Mm.
many different tools depending on the situation. And I think that is why it's so complicated. Tillage is almost as good as politics and religion for getting people wound up.
Well, and so here's where I will plug for our January 6th episode. We've got Phil Needham is going to join the show for our kickoff episode for 2025, as well as Dr. David Lobb at the University of Manitoba. And we are exactly that, going to talk about tillage erosion, and all sorts of those good things. So save all those wonderful tillage questions for the January 6th episode. Now, Ray Dowbenko, you listened to my instructions. Pete ignored them. Because for my instructions for this episode, we're supposed to be pick your favorite topics that we covered this year, and we're going to talk about them. And that's what Ray did. Pete said, "No, I'm sending you my own slides." So we've got lots to cover tonight. So I want to go to the on-farm field trial.
Before you do that,
Oh
before I just
yes,
to add time, you made the comment about the right tools for the right job. Well, you've got two
yes.
tools on the job tonight, but we're neither doing the right thing. To
Mm,
Pete's comment about the moldboard plow, I get the perspective because when my grandparents came in 19 late 1800s, early 1900s, we're talking like sod and mud huts and things of that nature, and tillage was very important. But then tools change, but still there's the right, as Pete said. I just want to give him kudos. Not that he needs any more, but we can't disrespect what we've done in the past if we've learned something from it and it still
right.
has utility, but we do have to move ahead and learn. And now I'm going to let you go ahead. Sorry,
All
Lindsay.
right. No, that's okay. I like it. And Mark adds, every tillage tool has its place, and it depends on where and how you use them. That's right. One of the 10 commandments of the agronomist,
Got to get
it
that word
depends.
in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. John mentions that for 40 acres of hay ground, probably the best option. I wouldn't disagree. And Kevin says we would all have a panic attack if we went to the Fraser Valley in May, as every corn acre is plowed. Again, it's the Fraser Valley, very high moisture, high biomass.
And
And Pete, go ahead.
well, but in the spring, right?
Yep,
And different than in the
yep,
fall
that's
because
right.
we're planting a crop right away and we don't
Yep.
have that entire winter season where the soil is
Mhm.
bare. So the vast majority of erosion happens in the non-growing season.
That's right.
So if you have to do it and you can get away with it in the spring, it's much less impactful than it is in the fall. It's still impactful, but again, as you point out, Kevin, how much rainfall does Kevin get? Like
All of
1,300
it.
millimeters a year or something, like just a crazy amount of rain. And
He steals it
and
from
how do you
Alberta.
manage that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, Jeanette adds Rob Miller had to explain what min-till meant in the east because the pictures weren't lining up with what we know as min-till out west. You're right, Jeanette. What is minimum tillage for Ontario is not minimum tillage for even Manitoba, but especially not Saskatchewan or Alberta. So a different world indeed. Okay, so as I mentioned, Ray is my favorite right now because he did what I asked. And so on the on the for the first slide. So producer Jay, we're going to talk about I want to talk about on-farm trials first. And we covered this sort of in a couple different ways. But we did setting up field trials. We talked about on another episode, we talked about good data and data literacy. Deb Campbell joined us for that one as well. It's always one that gets a lot of questions going. There's always really great conversation about how to set these things up. So, Ray, why was this topic one of the ones that you felt was an important one that we covered this year?
Okay, for full disclosure, Lindsay had asked for our top three yearly episodes.
Mhm.
I agonized over this. I told them I got it down to 13, then I had it to 8, then we had a email session. I got it down to 4, then I got it down to 3.
You did well.
And this was one of the 3. And it was because, there's been reduced oversight from CFIA in the last number of years, an increased entry of new products. And as an agronomist, everybody faces this idea there's something new, and should I try this? And how do I try this? And what do I do? And it's biostimulants, crop production aids,
Mhm.
biologicals, all this type of thing. And so my question was, and to the audience, as an agronomist, a retailer, a grower, a trusted advisor, how do you discern what is useful? Like on my family farm, people try things and nobody wants to admit it was a mistake. And then we've got people, as Pete said in the past, that did 5,000 acres of early seeded wheat when they,
Utterly wheat.
well, we should have just tried 300, but on it goes and it works. But I just have this, I guess, pet peeve about trying to do the right thing. Not that I always do, heaven help me, but discerning the marketing message from the actual scientific message. And this is why I picked this, because I think
Mhm.
this is very practical, very very important for people on the farm to understand that they need to use some judicious decisions to discern whether it's marketing or it's real.
Mhm. Now, Pete, on that note, from the perspective of and Christmas hat off to you that you do always drive home, set up those plots, send in the plot results. These are very important things. These are Pete's 10 commandments. Um, but Ray mentioned specifically something like biologicals. How are we as agronomists, as advisors, exactly that group, how do we set up trials that will give us answers we can make decisions with? Because this one seems really hard on the biologicals front.
So, Lindsay, I just want to start by pointing out that Wheat Pete's Word was one of the sponsors of the setting up farm trials, right? Because
Okay.
that's how much I believe in on-farm trials. And if you get an email from Wheat Pete, it says at the bottom, there are no mistakes in agriculture, only
Mm,
test plots. And that's a quote from Ken Nixon, great friend. But when you say how biologicals, well, Lindsay, it's like everything else. You absolutely you have two options. One, you have to figure out when that, like, under what conditions will that treatment work, or the treatment, if you're going to do it all the time, has to work at least, I don't know, 3 times out of 4. It should be 4 times out of 5. There's almost no treatment, not even phosphorus on wheat. I am the poster child for phosphorus on wheat. You can still find the odd trial where you shake your head and say, what the heck, we're not getting any response to the phosphorus on wheat here. And yet, I don't know what that number is, 19 times out of 20 or 99 times out of 100 we do, but
Mhm.
nothing works 100% of the time. But it's got to be consistent enough that you can use it and reliably know the treatment costs me $20 on average. 4 out of 5 times I'm going to get $40. That makes sense. Or I just got a real spike in temperature with biologicals. One of the things that is really exciting in the biological world is that they can tie cytokinin levels to heat stress. And right at flowering, the cytokinin levels, if it goes hot, they drop, and that means that you get less pollination. So, if that's the case, can we actually design trials where we don't do it if we have a cool pollination period, but on the years where we get heat right at
Mhm.
pollination, let's do the trials and figure out, is that real, or is that just it works in the greenhouse, but it doesn't work in the field. So everybody in the chat, by the way, is saying replication is 100% correct. Not just replication, but be careful. You also should have randomization, because if you do replication A B A B A B, and across that field it goes from low yield to high yield, B is always on the high yield side, and it's going to look like it yielded more, even though it didn't. So, most of the time, at least 2 replications. Nowadays, man, it's so easy to do replications with our automation. And my last comment is, be really careful. And Elizabeth Hawkins in the on farm trial session talked about this, but these learning blocks, everybody's really excited about learning blocks, but they don't always take into account the bleed from the combine going into the learning block, coming out of the learning block. So those learning blocks have to be long enough, and you have to
Right.
trim the edges off to make that work. I'm pretty excited about Caleb Niemeyer's work, where you can actually do strips in the field, the whole full length of the field, and then his statistical process will turn that into replications based on what the yield monitor is saying, and they can look at that in zones and get a much better 12 reps out of 2 strips in the field. And I think that's way more reliable than the learning blocks. I worry about learning blocks because I don't think they always get interpreted right.
Mm-hmm. Now, Jason Fote out of Manitoba, is when we're looking at evaluating products, do they have local replicated data? Are they going to set up research with credible organizations? And if it's just anecdotes or testimonials, we throw it away. And everybody loves a good story, right? And yes, stories are great to listen to, but we're talking about having to make financial decisions here, and we need some data to make that happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, Pete.
No, well, I just see Mark puts in the chat there too, right? Calibrated
Yep.
grain cart yield
Yes.
monitors are just very across a field. They'll be plus or minus 0.5% within a given strip. They can be out 5%, 8% pretty easily. Uphill versus downhill makes a big difference. So, yeah, it just
Yep.
trials are incredibly important. But if you're going to base financial decisions on them, do them right. So,
Mm-hmm.
hey, Ray, by the way, kudos to you. This is a great pick as one of the 3 things that you want to talk about for the year in review.
Well,
It also
thank you,
counts for the
Pete.
year moving forward. Yep.
Yeah, I don't want to touch any buttons, but I don't see the chat, so I'm not even going to try to like touch something and lose myself. But I want to go back to your comment about the cytokinins and the heat stress. And when I started with biologicals about 15 years ago, it was mostly in Eastern and Western Europe and Southeast Asia. And the products did what they were supposed to do, but we were dealing with extreme temperatures, environments, sub-Saharan Africa, degraded soils, 0.3% organic matter. And it reminded me when you bring some of these products back to North Dakota or Melfort with 14% organic matter, it's not really helping. And a lot of it was like echinacea. You have to take it before you get sick. Time it
Right.
so that your comment about cytokinins and heat stress, I'm going to get heat stress in July. So you put on these products and it preloads, front loads, makes sense. But if you're trying to do it after the fact, you're already
They're
bleeding
not
and you're not
curative.
going to
Yeah.
like you got to go to the doctor and get stitched up. That's the thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
don't apologize. And I didn't know you couldn't see the chat, so that's great. I can make up whatever I want.
No,
Perfect. You would not.
I'm
I
thinking
can see the
Jason and
chat.
Warren and Kevin and John are picking on me, and
Yes.
that's okay.
No,
I'm waiting
you
for
know what?
Tammy to like jump in.
Yeah, so far so good. You're fine. And you
Okay,
can just trust me on
I'm
that
good.
one. Yeah, exactly. Warren
Pick
does
on
say,
Peter,
I said,
guys. Pick on Peter.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Look at his hat. It's ridiculous. Warren says, I send everything home and split weigh it on the truck scales. Very important. It's the only yield monitor I trust. Yeah, that not everybody has that option, but if you do, that is also a great one as well. So yes, and Ashley mentions I see great value in replicated multi-site. What is happening? Do you have dessert that you're not sharing?
Peter's got
Oh my
chocolate.
gosh, you've got what the heck? Where's mine? Are those the chocolate ones? Are those with the like the crunchy, the like little they're like sweet and savory? I would like all of those. Please send them. I have no snacks. What's going on? This is my show and I have no snacks. This is terrible. Okay. So agreed. This was a fantastic episode. Definitely a topic we'll come back to. We covered it a few different ways. And there's always more on this one. I think that the key here that both of you have hit on, and Ray, I like how you phrased it of nobody likes to make mistakes. And Pete, you're right. There are no mistakes, only test plots. So that's what we have to do. We just need to call them test plots, Ray. Just tell everybody, well, it's not a mistake, it's a test plot. And then everything's fine. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Yes? Okay.
Nobody
Uh,
wants their neighbors to see those mistakes or those
Well,
test plots, right?
yes, they always happen at the road though. That's the problem. It never happens at the back of the farm. But it's true. We have a bit of an issue. Okay. We're gonna quickly, producer Jay, if you would, let's have our second read of the night, and then we'll get back to our conversation here on looking back on 2024. Our sponsors for the Agronomists are Real Ag Shops, Real Ag Radio, and the Truth About Ag podcast. This podcast is produced by Evan Schout and Christian Hebert of Farmer Coach and Hebert Grain Ventures. It aims to bring you closer to the heartbeat of agriculture through candid conversations and honest discussions. Find episodes wherever you get your audio, including RealAgriculture.com and the Real Ag podcast feed. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Now I did, Pete, manage. You did sort of put two things together here. So Ray picked another episode and Peter did whatever he wanted, but it does actually relate. So that's me doing the heavy lift here of connecting these things. We're going to talk about the power of rotation. And this is also going to bring in, Pete's got some slides on the nature versus nurture debate that is raging right now that we are also going to pull together. So Ray, I'm going to start with Ray because he listened again. So we talked about the power of rotation. We covered rotation a couple different ways again over the season, but a few different sort of aspects of it. And we try to I try to, when we talk about rotation, I try to bring in the aspects that I think we still have a lot of questions about, which is why does rotation have such an impact on the following crop, usually to the good. So it's fascinating to me that those are the questions we don't always have answers to. But Ray, what fascinates you about the discussion on the power of rotation?
Well, I'm gonna get okay. I'm not even gonna tell you what I'm gonna do. But the idea I said this earlier about a grower having to incorporate all the information that's thrown at them to be successful in their farm operation. We have experts that dabble in a certain area, and then not in others. So rotation is kind of like that. It reminds me of that. Is like, why are we doing these things? Crop sequence, there's different benefits. So we do these things, but we don't always understand why. And obviously, the insects, diseases, nutritional, there's all sorts of residue, tillage, all sorts of benefits. But full disclosure, I'm a Bobby Helgeson fan. I think she's brilliant. I think she towers above anything that I have for basic understanding. And I wasn't going to say this in the email, but I'm going to say it tonight. But when I watched that episode, to see Dr. Dave, I don't want to say fawn over, but step back and say, Bobby knows stuff that I don't know. And I thought
Mm,
that was just wonderful of Dave to do that because it was like Bobby's world. She works in this. And this is, to me, like I get wet over this stuff. It's just like so much to know and so much to learn. And whether we can incorporate it or not, I do not know. But you struggled to get Bobby on once. I really just want to give a plug and say, get her back.
I
There's so much to
yes.
learn.
Yes. So Bobby, to her credit, tries to say yes when she can. She is a very busy woman, let me tell you. And so, but you're right. She is, whenever I want to talk about microbes and the secret life of microbes, Dr. Helgeson is the one. When we want to talk about soil, I always ask. She doesn't always say yes. But I will keep trying, and she will probably say yes at least once. And I agree. She is fantastic.
I just want to point out it's not just about what I would call the secret life of microbes and plant signaling, but it's the whole idea of crop rotations and why farmers need to pay attention, other than economics. And I get the economics locked into rotation. I'm in Indiana, it's corn, soybean, corn, soybean, corn, soybean, or I'm somewhere else, it's
Yeah.
corn, corn, corn. Or in Pete's world, it's wheat, 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 double crop
Oh,
soybeans, wheat, wheat, wheat. But
no.
there's reasons for these things, right? And I think the economics I get, but at some point we have to really understand why we're doing these things rather than just do them because grandpa did them.
Yeah.
Just there's a benefit. There's a big benefit. And you've had so many guests throughout the all the episodes on weeds, insects, breaking disease cycles. And I think those messages need to be told again and again and again to reinforce the positives rather than just a knee-jerk reaction to, oh, corn's this, wheat's this, I should grow this, soybeans, oh, flax, organic flax, we can $32 a bushel, but can we grow
$32
it?
a
So
bushel. Yeah, exactly. And I think this quote works well for Dr. Dave, and he of course was on just a couple weeks ago on which, as Rigas Haramono said, "In God we trust. The rest, show me the data." And that's one of the things I really appreciate about Dr. Dave bringing on this show when it comes to rotation is the long-term trials that they have at University of Guelph Ridgetown, that he can bring some of that data, because that is one of those key pieces when exactly when we're looking beyond what the crop price and what my penciling out is in a crop budget, we need to have that data to be able to say this is why you've got to stick with a rotation. Yes, Warren, and you have to grow wheat. So wheat Pete, you of course are a lover of rotation, and apparently in Ontario that's three crops. Can we work to a fourth, or do we still have to get better at the three?
Oh, we have to get better at the three, but we can work to a fourth, I'm pretty sure,
Okay.
because winter canola is
Hmm.
really potentially going to change the game here in Ontario. The new varieties, Mercedes in particular, because it needs vernalization, doesn't bolt in the fall. I really think that gives us a great opportunity to add a fourth cropper in the rotation, and maybe, you know, perish the thought, but maybe we end up double cropping soybeans after the winter canola because it tends to come off a bit earlier than the winter wheat. But
Right.
this whole concept of rotation, it's not just rotation, it's also sequencing. And Bobby did a really great job of helping to understand some of that, but we still have a long way to go. And I find it really interesting, the Manitoba data where they track what crop grows, does better after another crops. And it's, you got to be a bit careful because it's not side by side research,
That's right. Yep.
but it's a trend. And when you're doing that economics, a lot of growers just say, "Oh gosh, so I'm going to grow peas this year because that's a way better economics than barley." But what they don't factor in is, well, wait a minute, what crop did you grow last year? And are your peas going to yield less because of the crop they're following, or is the crop that you're going to follow the peas with going to yield less because they're following peas? So
Right.
there's a whole portion of that economics that we totally don't even consider. When growers in
Yep.
Ontario say there's no money in wheat, when Adam Pfeffer and Warren likes to get on this once in a while, poverty grass, it's poverty grass, and so that's, they're looking at it on a 1 year basis. But you go back to Dr. Dave's research, and not, I mean, Bill Dean, and it's not just one site.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you have this 5.5% corn yield increase. 2 years after the fact, it's 11% more soybeans. When you start adding that to the value of the wheat, it changes it dramatically. When you go to places like North Dakota, sunflowers really come into play. So it's
Mhm.
crop sequencing, and Bobby helps us with that, but it's also understanding what really doesn't work. Do not grow corn after canola, and it doesn't
Mhm.
always fail, but if
Yep.
anything's going to fail, that will. And there's some reasons for that, but this sequencing thing is really quite important. And the soil microbiology, it's just fun stuff. There's so much we don't know.
There is, but
Yeah,
there's
Lindsay,
also some stuff we do know that backs up a lot of these decisions. Go ahead. Right.
I was just going to say that last episode when you had the Pulse episode and Laura pulled up the graphic and
Yeah.
people commented there weren't enough crops in it. That's full by the Manitoba Agricultural Services Corporation. They have that data. To Pete's point, it's not about economics. It's just about what the yield is from crop sequence to crop sequence. But it
That's right.
gives you a very good picture about what crop, as Pete just said, follows the previous crop the best. And you start
Yeah.
to work your rotation or your crop sequence to fit that. And when you spend a little time looking at those graphs and the data from Manitoba Agricultural Service Corporation, you kind of see why that is. But it is, I'll use situationally specific rather than depends. It is situationally specific to your environment and your growing area. And so, what sequence works in Western Canada does not always work in Eastern Canada because the environment's different, the weed pressure, the insects, the disease, a little different. But that information is out there, and we need to continue with the agronomists on Monday night, every night for decades, well past, and to get
Yep.
this information out. I
Hmm.
really enjoy this year. I'm sorry. I just love
I
this Monday night thing.
so Ray, I'm so glad, and the check's in the mail. And I can say that now because there's mail again. But no, Ray, but to that point, and like I don't, not to, I know it's my show and this is my job and I get it, but I feel very lucky to be able to do this. And also I think that I am so thankful for the people that agree to be on it, who say yes, because live is a tough one. Not everybody wants to say yes. And I really do feel like there's so much we get to share and we get to learn from each other when we get to have this this forum where we can ask those questions and where we can put two researchers together. And so behind the scenes, I'll let everybody know. One of my favorite things to do is introduce the guests to each other because a lot of guests know of each other, but they've never actually met. And so from my perspective, it's an awesome way to introduce people to each other and connect people as well. That and sometimes they have those behind the scenes conversations and get in touch later. Yes, Ray, go ahead.
Lindsay, I got to say this, Peter, you're going to love this. Is like, Lindsay, you do a very good job at what you do and it's well appreciated, but you are also in a position that you get to herd gods. So that's
Mm,
kind of like
it is
special.
true. Yes, especially this show. Okay, now Kevin's got a really great question, and Mark's got another one on this rotation piece. So Kevin says, and both of you, if you want to take this, would chemical residue influence crop rotation sequencing? And Ray, maybe I'll start with you first. In that this is something I think in Western Canada we sort of always think of pulses, right? But we always think of it so much so in the if it was too dry, did our herbicides break down or not? Am I risking, a crop injury if I go back to pulses too soon, etc. But there's way more to the herbicide question with rotation sequences as well.
Okay, I'm not going to go the way more part because I'm too old to go way more. I'm good once, but not good twice. But
Okay.
I will just say that from the chemical residue perspective, you thanks, Lindsay, for laughing. You were crying earlier, but that's okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
certainly. I mean, we've had dry years, we've got residual chemistry. Pick your herbicide, pick your company, but it's in the blue book in Alberta. It's in
Yep.
the herbicide information about what's your pH, what's your organic matter, what crop are you growing next, what did you apply, what was the rate. We need to be cognizant of that. So certainly chemical residue influences crop rotation. But I think being an older guy, I kind of been doing this for a while, and I kind of think, what am I going to grow next? What am I going to grow next? What am I going to grow next? I don't want to hamstring myself. That's a plug for the pork producers, but I don't want to hamstring myself in the sense that I'm going to like load up on a certain chemistry this year, and I don't know what I'm going to grow in that field next year. I should
Yeah.
darn well know what I'm planning to grow next year, and I shouldn't put the chemistry down today that's going to influence or impact what my decision is going to be next year. So yeah, I do. Short answer, Kevin, Cowman. I think, yeah, I've got to watch what I'm going to put on this year for what I'm going to grow next year. But you just grow corn, 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 corn. So I'm not so sure what I can help you with.
Come on now. He's got some rye in there and some alfalfa.
I got some rye in
Um,
here too, but okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's completely allowed. It is an evening show. Now, Pete, I also think about this from the other perspective. Having a more diverse rotation can also open up opportunities to get a handle on some weeds that maybe are harder to control if all you're doing is corn, soy, corn, soy, corn, soy.
Yeah, absolutely, Lindsay. And so, even again, shudder to mention it, but an opportunity for perhaps some very targeted tillage, if that's what it takes. I saw an article just recently that kochia really
Hmm.
doesn't tolerate being buried very well. So
Mm,
if you have a good crop rotation where maybe once every 7 years you could bury the kochia and get a cover crop growing after you did that to stabilize the soil, you might help yourself there. But at the end of the day, when you open up the rotation, you get these other opportunities, fall control of perennial weeds, of winter annual weeds, by far the best time. And if all you do is grow full season corn and soybeans, by the time you get those taken off, it's often not ideal conditions for that. You just put this amazing, incredible, wonderful, beautiful crop called wheat in there, and you get a totally different opportunity. So 100%.
Right. Okay. Producer Jay, can you put up Warren's comment about rye? We'll just leave it up there so that I don't want Ray to miss that one. But we've got another question on this that doesn't refer to the herbicide sequencing. Mark, yeah, there you go, Ray. Mark wants to know, is there a crop sequence that will eliminate white mold with beans every third year? Mark, you are asking for the moon. I
Yeah.
don't think so. Yeah.
No,
Pete?
the answer
No.
quickly is no. And it's interesting because the state of Delaware is actually doing some research on cover crops to control slugs.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
maybe, but they haven't got an answer yet. They're looking at that. If you think about the white mold fungus and how it works, you would have to have a cover crop that encouraged or stimulated the germination of the sclerotinia, the sclerotial bodies in the
Yeah.
soil, so that they weren't there, and they live for 7 years in the soil. Like at
Yeah.
the end of the day, Mark, I wish we had that answer, but if we did, if it was that simple, we'd be doing it.
Okay. When you say something like Delaware, anyone who watched Wayne's World will know, hi, I'm in Delaware. That's all I can ever think of when anyone mentions Delaware. So there you go. But I also sing Waterloo every time someone says Kitchener Waterloo. So welcome to how my brain works, everybody. There you go. Okay. So, and as Jeanette says, and she's in Southern Manitoba, mold is gold. And that is the other consideration, is that usually white mold hits when we've got some real yield potential on those beans, right, Pete?
Yeah, 100%. But if you're in your part of the world, Lindsay, mold
Oh,
can be
it's
so
bad.
bad that
Yeah.
and again, situationally specific. Here in southwestern Ontario, we almost never get that level of white
Yeah.
mold in soybeans. We do in edibles, not in soybeans. You go to
Yep.
eastern Ontario, it can be 80% crop loss. So a
Yep.
little bit of white mold is gold, a lot of white mold is not.
That's right. And Mark brings up the point, we haven't talked about this, but wheat wheat in the rotation means that manure gets put on in a timely fashion. And Mark adds, we need beans every third year so we can get wheat in, so we have enough land open midsummer for manure. And that is correct. It is it is a system. It's not a 1 year thing. So we
Mhm.
always have to be thinking ahead, right? Now, we do have a bit of a side note that sort of fits into this. And Pete, you've been having this fascinating conversation that was sparked by this idea that nature knows best, nature versus nurture. And you talked about it a few weeks ago on We Pete's Word about how, if nature has a perfect system, we should be trying to mimic nature at all times. And you brought up the point that but nature doesn't take a harvest necessarily, right? So agriculture, while it occurs
Mhm.
in nature, we are trying to do something different because we're actually trying to get a harvest that does in fact remove something from the equation. So, have you settled this argument about nature versus nurture and if we can make agriculture just like nature and it be just as good? Because I would think you've had 2 weeks to work on it, so you should have it solved by
Yeah. So I
now. No?
think it was solved long ago. So
Oh,
actually, Jay, if you
good.
could put up my slide number 2, and that will help relate to this topic. And this is from Andrew McGuire, a really, really smart researcher from Washington State University. If you don't follow him on Twitter, X, call it whatever you want, you should. But he's just so insightful, and it's always going back to the data. We already have talked about the importance of data, and so it's a really romantic idea. Nature is the best, and we all like to walk through the woods. And when we walk through the woods on a glorious day, it's serene, it's beautiful. If you walk through a cornfield and the same day, it's hot and it's humid and it just doesn't feel as good. So it's really romantic. It's just, we have this concept. It's sort of the same concept as the good old days, Well,
Right.
I don't know. The good old days, if I had a tooth that had a decay in it, in the good old days, they would have just pulled that stinking tooth out. Or
Hmm.
if I got, some disease, I would have just died. I'm not sure the good old days are all that good. And so I want everybody listening, and it doesn't matter to me if you're an organic farmer or you're a conventional farmer or you're somewhere in between. At the end of the day, we do good work. And when people say, "Oh, but nature is wonderful and conventional agriculture is the bane of the world," it's not, because we wouldn't be we wouldn't be where we are today in society without being able to feed people that could do the research. If everybody was out there gathering their own food, we would not have scientists, we would not have developed computers. And are there some unintended consequences? Absolutely. But when they say nature is superior, that's not correct. Nature is different. It's an ecosystem. I really think it's interesting because lots of the agroecologists will say that rotation is an ecological function or practice. It Rotation doesn't exist in nature at all. The only rotation is when it burns and then it all starts again and it ends up in climax vegetation, whatever that happens to be. And you don't harvest much. So cropland cannot function like a wild or a natural ecosystem, because in the natural ecosystem, everything is returned to the ground. All of the plants are trying to put lots into the roots. And in in our current society, we cannot sustain mankind by doing that. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it just a full stop out. Are there some great things in nature? Absolutely. You want to protect nature, maximize your production from the best cropland, because that means we'll use the minimum number of acres to produce what we need to produce.
And I will say, nature, it is. It's beautiful. It has figured out a lot of systems. It's brutal, right? Like nothing about nature is kind. There are just consequences. Some of those consequences are good. Some of them are bad. It all depends on if you're predator or prey or bacteria or fungus. It does matter. So I think, Pete, you're right. We sort of romanticize this idea that sort of perhaps takes us away from the reality. Ray, I would love your thoughts on nature knows best.
Oh my gosh. You want to be philosophical, we need to spend a few hours together, then your husband and my wife would talk. But the idea here is that as Pete said, nature is basically a monoculture. It's not designed to do anything but grow what it grows. Our commercial agriculture or food production is designed to provide food. And that's full stop, to use Peter's word. But it's nice to romanticize, to say we can do organic, regenerative, but we can't do it on the scale necessarily to feed more than just our own families. So we have to look at things different. I appreciate Peter's comment about, inconsequential things that happen, and we still learn. That makes sense. But I had to go and look at Dr. McGuire's work and some of the research that he's done, and it makes sense. It provides an opportunity on both sides of the argument, and I think that's important. Is that we need to recognize everybody has their own opinion and their own place that they come from, and so we can say that we're doing this and it's great. They're doing that and that's great, but it's the scale. And there was one other slide that Pete had, and I want to pull that. I want him. Producer Jay, can you pull up Pete's slide with the graph from 1960 and the separation between land and food production and people?
Mm, yep.
Slide one, Jay.
And I'm gonna hijack on Pete because nobody's done this in the last number of years. Has taken Pete's thunder. Is I looked at this graphic that Peter sent, and he's going to speak to this, and I saw the separation between food production and population and land use. And so I used to do a lot of this, and it was so many farmers fed so many people in the 50s, so many people were fed by one farmer, and it took like 20 farmers to feed a couple of people to all of a sudden one farmer's feeding 419 people. And that's the land use intensification. We're getting better. separation between technology, equipment, information, our ability, and that I get. The intensification, we're getting better at what we do, we're feeding more people. But what struck me on this graph, Peter, was the separation we got between food production is 3.9 and population is 2.6. And it made me think that some of the industrialized and developed nations are wasting a lot of food, and we need to get better at that. And that's just my pet peeve.
Yep.
So I'll just stop right there.
Yep.
You guys go ahead.
Okay. We do actually have to pause it there for just a moment, Pete. So hold that thought because we only have like 10 minutes left and we do have still a lot of ground to cover. And Jason is right on the money. We're going to talk a bit about looking forward into 2025. But first, Producer Jay, if you would, we have our last read of the night. Thank you to our show sponsors, The Truth About Ag, Real Ag Shops, and Real Ag Radio. Real Agriculture's Real Ag Radio is Canada's only daily 1-hour agricultural radio show broadcast across North America on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. Hosted by Sean Haney, the show airs weekdays, 4:30 Eastern, and is rebroadcast at 7 a.m. the next day. Listen live on Rural Radio 147, check it out on the site at realagriculture.com/radio, or download the podcast wherever you get your audio. All right. So for this last part of the show, we are going to touch on Ray's third pick, and it dovetails into this conversation. So spraying in challenging conditions evolved into, yes, a discussion on spraying in high heat, spraying in inversions, but also using drones and where we can use drones and where we can't legally, and all those sorts of things. And this dovetails, I think, into the discussion of technology and where some of the tech is going to take us. But Jason brings up a good point to bring us back down to earth. Jason, thank you. Bringing it home. That is not a trademark term, but it is one that Polyev loves. What should growers be looking for in 2025 to maximize yields, but doing it profitably? And this is all in the context, of course, of high inputs, or at least sticky input prices, which are not likely to come down with a Canadian dollar that is tanking, and perhaps not great commodity prices either. So, Pete, I'll go to you first. Is going for highest yields possible the solution, or is it going for the most efficient bushels possible? And if so, please give me the secret recipe.
There's no secret recipe. And
Damn it.
by the way, you cannot save your way to profitability. It just does not work. But I see Jason C, which I don't know if that's Jason Castleman or who that
I
is,
think
but
so. Yep.
are applied nutrients the only real variable cost? And no, there's other variable costs. But again, just like with the rotation, think about the long-term impacts. And the one place that I think we can't take our foot off the gas is weed control. Now, I do think that with Tom and Jason DeVoe's discussion, that there's lots of technology out there that says we probably could spend less on chemicals if we could put them where they needed to be better. And so whether that's green on green technology, whether that's the oh shoot, now I can't remember the name of the technology where they weed it, but also
Yep.
Greg Stewart presented to the Manitoba seed growers, and I can't remember the name of that technology, but where they use satellite
Hey,
pictures
green
over.
eye,
Sorry, no, it
see and
wasn't
spray
green eye.
or green eye? No.
No, it wasn't. And I apologize. Regardless, they
We'll
take
find it.
satellite imagery from the last 5 years and they look at where those weed patches have showed up over the last 5 years, and then they give you a prescriptive map for using a more expensive but still effective chemistry, something like ethylfluorine, that will still give you control where most other products won't. So I think there's lots of opportunity to use technology in weed control to do a better job and still get that good weed control. But you can't get poor weed control. You can't cut weed control. and let weeds go to seed, because 1 year seeding is 7 years weeding. Right? That's a, I don't know, that's an old adage, right, wrong, or indifferent, but it gives you the idea. The other thing, though, and again, Lindsay, I think it's technology. So we're in tight economic times. Well, if you've done a good job of soil fertility when you had good profitability, and you've built that soil bank account up, a year like this is the year where you can take your foot off the gas to some extent. Now, be careful, because if you're on a heavy clay soil and you say, "Oh, I've got great phosphorus levels, I don't need to apply any phosphorus," man, my experience is that in heavy clay soils, we don't get as good a root growth. When you don't get as good a root growth, you need more base fertility in your phosphorus and your potash. So, as Ray would say, it's situationally specific. But if I'm on a loam soil and I have a 35 phosphorus, I can take my foot off the gas, or a 150 potash. I can back off, maybe not to zero, but to just a small amount in the starter, live off that soil bank account. I also think that you can save some money on tillage. I think if you can do smart tillage, if you can do minimum tillage where it takes less diesel fuel, that's another opportunity. But and disease control, right? That's the other one that I think you can actually make some money on, because there's lots of growers, they'll say, "Oh, Pete, I'm going over my wheat crop with my weed control product or my plant growth regulator in the spring anyway. I'm just throwing half rate tilt into that
Oh,
tank."
that half
And
rate
it's like,
tilt days.
yeah. Well, I mean, number one, half rates is the best way to develop resistance there ever was. Well, maybe not the best way, but it is one of the ways to develop resistance. Don't do it. And number two, you just spent, okay, it was only $8, but you just spent $8 that returned zero. So
Yeah.
I think there are opportunities. Again, the other side of that coin is, if you have tar spot and corn and you don't spray, you give up 15, 20, 40, maybe as much as 80 bushels per acre. So doing a good job of actually scouting and making smart management decisions can really pay on a year like this.
Now, Ray, I'm going to go to you in a
Well,
moment, but
okay,
there's a
I'll
good
wait.
good
I'll
point here.
wait.
Yes, please hold. Um, Sip your rye. Uh, so there's the point of the time that's spent getting the crop in and out. So John says there's a lot of slip inefficiencies. There you go. Eat your candy I don't have. Your baking I don't have. Getting the crop in and out. Time spent moving equipment, getting to and from the field, etc. Warren says I spend way too much time on the road and equipment. Part of farming on the border, farming a half circle. So we have, and we actually have a video on, say, the tender wagons, the transfer wagons, for being more efficient at spraying, etc. My question would always be to Warren and to John: if you had more time, where would you spend it that it would make you more money? So that's my question to you. Now, Ray, I will go to you on this question of looking to 2025. Your whole career pretty much was in the crop fertility industry. So please tell me how much more N I should be putting on to make money.
I'm kind of lost because I'm gonna hijack for a second because Pete just like
Perfect.
took my comment about Jason and Tom completely seriously, and I get that everybody has to apply something. And there's efficiencies there, Lindsay, but I love Tom and Jason because they take this complex physics stuff and boil it down to just like, this is what you need to do, this is why, and it's over and done with. There's no agonizing, there's no long story. It's just quick and easy. So my big shout out to Jason and Tom is because they make learning fun, just like the agronomists, they make it easy. Now, to your question about 2025, everything matters. There's no doubt. Um, Cost of fertilizer, cost of your seed, your hybrids, your tillage, your fuel costs, land rent, it all becomes very important, but you have to decide which is the most important. And yes, Lindsay, in my old life, I'd say, yeah, more fertilizer is a good thing, but that, to Pete's comment, it's not necessarily the right thing. I had a message with another guy the other day about skipping P and K because he's built up his phosphate, his potash levels, and But I got to tell you, I always tell my family when phosphate and potash is cheap, they better go bank it in the soil because it's a
Right.
low price right now. And pick your timing to buy things. I can't tell you what the crystal ball is going to say, but I do know that things like nitrogen and ammonium sulfate have jumped $40 a ton in the last month and a half.
Yeah.
So if you're asking the question about where you should cut now and you're thinking about fertilizer, you're about 3 months too late, baby.
Yep. Warren has answered my question as to if you had more time, what would you do with
Where
it?
would he
And
tell me? What is he
he
going to
has
do?
he has the best answer ever. He said he'd spend it with his family. So now I look like the jerk.
Oh, that's such a
Because farming
Christmassy thing.
eh,
That's great,
yeah,
Warren.
followed up by
Wonderful.
farming is dumb. Anyway, you pick this, Warren. You pick this. Nobody said you had to. Kevin's got a really good point. This is recent quota increases and high probability of more increases next year means I need more feed produced per acre. Cheaper to spend more per acre than to farm more acres. Now, amen to that in something as tight as the Fraser Valley, but there are plenty areas where getting more out of the land base you have is probably the better option than trying to find more land, especially with land prices and land rents where they are. It's farming the land you have better versus trying to farm more land. Pete, am I right or am I
So
wrong?
I get that,
Or
and I
Ray,
agree
go
with
right ahead.
Kevin. No, I agree with
Yep.
that with Kevin about cheaper to spend more per acre than to farm more acres. That I get that. But now the reverse or the corollary to that, and I'm not picking on Kevin, I'm just going to ask in general in Lower Fraser Valley, if you get pressed for lack of land in the future, what are you going to do? You can only spend more per acre until all of a sudden the economics say that you have less acres. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that's a real thing to think about the next couple of decades is agricultural land becomes less available. And it's this Peter's comment and that slide about land intensification growing more food. People expect us to get better, but we can only get better to a certain point. And when they keep taking land for cities, for soccer pitches, for golf courses, whatever, then complain that food is expensive, there's got to be the come to Jesus meeting, so to speak, about where are the trade offs? How much sandlot baseball, football do you want golfing versus do you want to eat? And that's another discussion. Maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe next year. It's true. John's got a great point, and I love this. And Steve's got a follow up one, and I want to share both of them. John says, "Don't forget, diesel is a buck 30 a liter. Can we find a way to save 5,000 liters a year?" And Pete, that sort of works into your comment. Is there a way that we can save on field passes, right? And
Right.
whether that's tillage, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing that we haven't mentioned here, you want to save, and it's the problem is you got to spend money to save the money, but it actually pays back. If you're a farmer like Warren on the road a lot, then having on the go tire inflation, right? Central tire inflation systems, you save 10% in fuel and you save 20% on tire wear. So it actually is good return on investment, but you got to spend, you have the dollars to spend, right? And I totally agree with Steve's comment. I think you're going there, but trying to find 1% everywhere, that's sometimes tough, but that's you got to look for the small wins from that perspective. When times are tight, you just got to look for the small wins. And
Yep.
oh yeah, the other thing I was going to mention, just you want to get more productive. Tile drainage is one of the ways in wet climates for sure, which includes Manitoba. May not be quite as good in Saskatchewan, but man, you're in the Red River Valley. Tile drainage will pay, guaranteed.
Hmm. And definitely improving the land that you have. You're right. Tile drainage in many areas is, yes, it's an upfront cost, but it will pay for itself very quickly. But there are other ways you can improve as well. Yes, Ray. I love this. He's putting his
I just
hand up, guys.
just want to jump on Peter's comment, not jump on Peter, but uh,
Mm,
I fully
who
agree with
doesn't?
that. You have to spend money to make money. And you do it judiciously. That makes sense. And then I had an uncle, an old Ukrainian uncle, that played a lot of poker that used to say when he was bluffing, you have to speculate to accumulate. But he wasn't
Mhm.
always bluffing. And so there are times, to Pete's comment about tile drainage, and it doesn't always work everywhere, but you do have to, as a grower, speculate judiciously again to accumulate. You have to put your money where it's going to wisely make you sense, which is why you spend your money Monday evenings here, right? This is the
Hmm.
place you learn.
This is a place for all sorts of things. And to the question of if Andrew McGuire has been on the Agronomist, he has not, but I've added him to the list. This will be my annual, perhaps semi-weekly shout out that if you come across people in your travels that you think would be great guests or topics that you want explored, send them to me, lsmith@realagriculture.com. If you have my phone, text it. Do not call me. I don't answer my phone. Okay. Pete knows this. He knows he should always give me the heads up if he's going to call me. Okay. And that's right. So and so to that point, Steve brought up, not looking for 10% wins, look for 1% over and over. Dave Hooker says 5% rule in goals, increase crop yields 5%, decrease inputs 5%, do 5% better in marketing. So making smaller wins, but incrementally, can add up to big things. And Jeanette says efficiency sounds like a fun topic for 2025. Jeanette, if you can make efficiency fun, come on down because we'll try, but it is one of those topics that you're right. It's super important, but how do we make it fun? Because if it's fun, it gets done, right? Right. So if anybody's got some brilliant ideas on making efficiency fun, let's bring it. We can do that.
Yeah,
What
it
do you
won't
think,
take
Pete?
much for me to be 5% better in marketing. I am so horrible at marketing, just terrible.
Well, but
Hey,
Pete, it's a service though because you tell everybody what you do and then they do the opposite. So
yeah, it's a
you help
public
others.
service. Yes, yeah,
It's a
public
public
service.
service.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
exactly.
so hey, Lindsay, just one other thing that as because I last week I gave a seminar, Sasqueet, on lodging. You know, that's another place where you could potentially reduce your costs if you look at your genetics. If you have a variety that really stands well and you can manage your seeding rates, you put those two together, you sometimes can not have to spend money on a lodging product. So that, like, there are ways to do better. There's no doubt about that.
Mhm. Ray is shaking his head, and I don't know if I wanna
Well,
know
I
why.
just no, this genetic stand better thing, whatever.
Ah,
I think you've got a full year next year. Um, I'd
I think
really
so.
like to
Yeah.
see Andrew McGuire and the efficiency thing on, and the
Mhm.
cost savings, and maybe because you haven't had in the last number of years anything to do with economy and economists. And yes,
Mhm.
I could probably poke a few economists your way that won't be just
Okay.
like the basic run of the mill dry economist, but I do
I
think
like that.
some budget pencil guys that'd be fun, that would be useful.
Mhm. 'Kay. Budget and fun. Ray, come on now. Just kidding. We
Budget
can
and
try
fun.
that. I will say on my list, and thank you everyone who stuck around for this whole show. So in January we are going to talk about tillage, as I said. I'm trying to line up something with AI. We're going to talk. I do want to talk RNA technology and CRISPR technology on the variety development, hybrid development side. So we've got lots of ideas already in the works. Some of them already locked in. But yes, I'm trying to plan out as many as I can. So Pete will know we have a spreadsheet that we plunk things in, and Pete sometimes goes in there and wrecks it, and then I have to fix it. But I appreciate it anyway. Yes, exactly. So,
Another
um,
question.
yes, go.
So when you say AI, you're talking artificial intelligence or
That
artificial
is correct.
insemination?
You know
Okay.
what? They don't let me do many livestock programs. So in this context, it is artificial intelligence because I pretty much get
Okay.
one forage episode a year. I know, Pete. You haven't
And
been able to mock my sheep once yet.
the problem is we don't let you do livestock because all you ever talk about
I
is
know.
woolly pigs, woolly pigs,
I know.
woolly pigs, woolly pigs.
Because they're fantastic. Also, I am wearing real wool. It's fantastic. Anyway, Jason C wants to talk about the cost per bushel and revenue per acre. I will note that this is one of the things that we are going to tackle in some upcoming episodes on Relag. This idea of profit per acre or revenue per acre, of thinking more in those terms and recognizing that there may be portions of the field that are never going to make a profit, and can you do something different with those areas? I think it's a key question that with the technology we have, at our disposal. We should be doing a better job at mapping the profitability of our acres, not just the yield, etc. So there,
Agree.
I will leave.
Some parts
I
of the
will
field,
leave.
some,
Yes,
some parts
some
of the
parts will
field should
never make
not be
money.
cropped, and we do
Yeah,
need to look at how many bushels per acre covers my input costs. And if I can't make
exactly.
those bushels
Yeah,
per acre make work, then I shouldn't spend
yep,
the money on it. Agreed.
yep, yep.
There,
Agreed. And
there,
Pete's like,
there
no,
goes.
we need to put wheat from tree line to tree line, right?
No, but the problem is if you do that, Lindsay, there goes my whole farm.
Well, then Peter, what are you doing? You're speculating. That's what you're doing. You're speculating. What is it? Speculate to accumulate. That's
Speculating
what
to
you're doing.
accumulate.
Yeah,
Speculate
there you
to
go.
accumulate.
Yeah, I do now Mark says our crop ground is in hay or pasture. Mark, I would argue that is the best use of that ground. And so it's not crop ground, it's just hay ground or pasture.
Wo-
That's okay. That's what it should
Woolly
be.
pigs. Woolly pigs.
Mhm. Yes, and then woolly pigs make delightful lamb and we eat it. And or hay gets eaten by cows and they make steak and we love it. So there you go. Okay, we are out of time before we get the old cane across the neck. I was going to make one last joke about what was it? Ethylfluralene? What was that you said, Peter?
Ethylfluralin.
Okay, is that the
Avidex.
fifth yeah, is that the fifth Golden Girl was what I was gonna say. Anyway. Okay, so there
Yeah,
you
it's that
go.
old.
Yeah, it could be. Okay. It is that old. I know. Okay. All right. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We've got fantastic numbers of people watching. So many great comments, questions, suggestions. I appreciate all of them. But mostly I appreciate producer Jay, who hangs out with me every Monday night throughout the year.
Yay for
And Ray
Jay. Yay
Dowbenko.
for
Yes,
Jay.
yay for Jay. We're into the rhyming. And Ray and Peter, thank you so much for joining me here just ahead, of course, of the holiday season. I do appreciate you taking the time and sharing all your knowledge and your expertise and your fantastic senses of humor. Thank you both.
Yeah.
Thank you very
I
much.
hope
Happy
everybody can
holidays. Merry Christmas.
get time with your family,
Hmm.
relax, recharge, and be ready to go next year.
January 6th, we'll be back, 8 p.m. Eastern, live. We're going to talk tillage. Until then, everyone, yes, have a wonderful and safe holiday season and hope you have some downtime. Cheers, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.